we need to have different ways of being consistent. If you focus only on one way to learn a language, of course, there's going to be burnout. You're going to feel frustrated after trying to read the same book again and again and not understanding it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fluency Project, the podcast where language learners unlock their potential. We are on a mission to empower language learners by sharing practical tools, new ways of thinking, and inspiring stories so you can break through barriers and thrive in your language journey. My name is David Herrera. I'm your host, and in every episode, I will sit down with polyglots, educators, and everyday learners who have cracked the code. Together, we are going to explore the habits, strategies, and aha moments that make fluency achievable for you. Today's episode is brought to you by thefluencyproject.com. If you are in a journey to learn Spanish, English, or French, you are in luck, because we are opening our calendar for free assessments on your level on these languages and helping you to craft the best way to learn. Follow the link in the show notes and you will be able to schedule your 100% free language assessment spot. I would recommend to do it as soon as you can because we have limited spots and we just open those once a week. With that said, let's dive into today's conversation. Hello, Guillermo. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for accepting the invitation, and it's a pleasure to have you here. So, in this podcast, we are exploring unconventional ways to learn languages, break education barriers, and hear from polyglots, instructors, and self-taught learners how they learn languages. So, let's start from the beginning. Who are you and why you decided to learn a new language?
Well, I would say that I'm a language learner, but I'm also a teacher. I'm an English teacher. I've been doing it for, well, more than 25 years. And I wouldn't say that I decided to learn a new language, but to learn languages in general. Everything started with the conventional way. You have to fulfill some requirements for school. In our country, it's basically English or English. It's the one that you have to learn almost mandatorily. And then after a while, I came out with the idea of learning other languages. So I became a self-taught language learner, let's say. It then passed to be, well, my way of living, from just the curiosity or the obligation, the have to of learning something. It moved on to being my way of living.
So, how many languages do you speak now?
Fluently, I can speak English, Spanish, sign language. You know that every country has a different sign language, so I can use Colombian sign language, Portuguese,
Okay.
and a little of French. I'm in the process of learning more French now.
That's impressive. I'm actually right now trying to learn Italian, and it's always fun to find new words and how they connect to each other. So that's amazing. Take us to day one. What do you remember of your learning process in the early days?
Well, there's something funny because I remember myself being 7 or 8 years old in Florida, swimming in a pool, and actually not swimming, drowning in a pool, and not knowing how to ask for help because I had no knowledge about English. Actually, there was a lifesaver in the hotel, and well, that lady helped me. So if not, maybe I wouldn't be here talking to you today. And then things moved on, and I started having English lessons in sixth grade in my country. You don't learn English in elementary school. You start when you are in middle school. And it was awful for me. Me and my friends, we were like a club, an unwanted club of students who had no idea about the language. I didn't have a good relationship with my English teacher, and things were terrible. Then everything changed with a new teacher. So that that's perhaps my first experience with having a teacher who can motivate you and help you reduce the affective filter that you may have towards any subject that you may be studying. So that's what I remember: frustration, not knowing anything, and having an awful relationship with my English teacher.
It's quite interesting that the first moment that you realized that you needed English was because you were drowning, basically. So
Yeah.
it's important sometimes the way that you learn is because you have to learn, and it's a matter of death or life.
Yes, absolutely. But well, fortunately, it didn't happen.
If not, we were not here to talking today here. Right now, you have been teaching for 25 years, you say?
Yes, around 25,
25.
give or take.
Okay. So, um, you mentioned just a few seconds ago that you had a teacher that actually helped you in the process of learning and actually motivates you to learn the language. How are you applying those tricks or tips into your classroom right now?
Well, it's challenges are different nowadays. Students are less motivated and less easy to motivate. But I try to encourage them to realize that they're not as bad as they think. Many times you find students who feel like they're not good enough or they're not learning good enough. But actually, it's not true. They can be really good at the language, and I try to encourage them to understand this. So it's like one of those mobsters or mafia bosses movies that say he knows more than he or she are willing to admit. So I try to make them realize how much they have progressed from the moment when we started classes to this day.
What I'm hearing here is how important is the mindset when learning a new language. It is not just a matter of taking a book and reading it. It's actually something that you have in your mind and something that someone sometimes have to motivate you to learn and to understand that you actually can do it. Um, how do you help your students to deal with embarrassment when they sound awkward talking in English in this case?
Well, you know that there are several ways to correct a person when they are making mistakes. One of the most common ones is to repeat what they are saying using the correct pronunciation or the correct vocabulary word. That's what I try to to do to help them. I also find very useful sometimes to wait until the person finishes speaking. If I can, I take notes of the mistakes and then I repeat with an explanation. Like, well, this is a short vowel sound, so the pronunciation is this one, or, you're talking about the past, so you need to use this or that particular narrative tense. And finally, there is the correction of the mistake immediately. The person is speaking, you interrupt, and you make the correction. It really depends a lot on what the person feels like and the personality. You learn to understand that some students are shyer than the others. So it's sometimes it's better to correct them at the end, or sometimes if they are more aware of their learning process, so you repeat what they are saying. Another thing that I try to make them know when they feel embarrassed is that first they're in a learning process. It's not something fixed. They are entitled to make mistakes when they're learning a language. Second, it's very common to hear them say I'm sorry. And sometimes I try to tell them, well, you have nothing to say sorry, or you don't need to feel sorry about anything because you're not offending me. If you make a mistake, it is not an offense. You're not insulting me. You're not hurting me. You're just learning. And third, I also try to tell them that it is no big deal. I try to tell them, it's no rocket science. You can handle this. Just get over it and continue with the process. As much as you try to minimize the mistake, the person is going to feel even better and more confident, not only with you, but also with the language.
That's right. And I can relate a lot with that feeling of saying
Absolutely. Well, and a conventional method sometimes is connected to those archaic methods that we used to learn with. So in the times when we were in school, it was common to for teachers to apply the audiolingual method or the grammar only or the translation method. Yes, drilling exercises. So sometimes I use them to make them understand certain things. So I would say that I'm eclectic in the methodology I apply. I'm more focused on the communicative approach, perhaps, but sometimes you need to use other things. Something unconventional for the language learning is trying to have combine experiences with their native language. So, for example, one thing that I love to do with my students is having some film forums in which they participate with their Spanish teacher and they participate with me in English. So we try to find common grounds, perhaps something related to the book they're learning in Spanish that can be connected to what they're learning with me. If you focus on helping students to develop their competencies in the language instead of focusing on topics, things may be not so conventional. And honestly, the sky is the limit. There are so many things you can do that are not perhaps part of the book or part of the syllabus. I am not much into following a textbook page after page. And I try to warn my students at the beginning of the school year about that. I tell them, don't think I'm crazy if I tell you to open your books to page 25 today and then tell you to open your books to page 127 tomorrow. Because everything is based on what you are going to achieve, how you're going to become more competent in the language, and less on following a specific lesson plan sometimes. I have a lesson plan, of course. I plan everything ahead of time. I'm very well organized. I create my own syllabus, but it's not always the fixed or the same framework at the moment of teaching. That is very common for in other colleagues and in other learning processes. Thanks a lot. Well, now you're making me think about it, but I'd say yes. There are things that you try to do and they are a complete failure. I remember it's more connected, especially to the development in which the students are at. Right, I'm used to teaching older students in high school, sophomores, and I remember trying to teach seventh graders and working with cognitive biases, trying to teach them the concept of cognitive biases and how they are employed. Everything was because of an experience they had to develop during the term. And in this experience, they have to provide some talks in the TED format, right? And I thought that it was going to be good to teach my students about cognitive biases and to teach my students about fallacies and logical fallacies because they would recognize which ones they are using if they are following opinions or biases instead of following on facts for their talks. And it was a complete failure because they're seventh grade students and they are not ready for this kind of HOTS, high order thinking skills. They are still very concrete in their thinking, and that development is expected from them a little later in their lives, for at least 1 year later. I remember repeating that with eighth graders a little later. Actually, it happened this year in the school where I work, and it was completely successful. So, what I learned from that, definitely, I need to be more aware of modifying my way of teaching depending on the developmental stage that my students are at.
Excellent. And that is, again, a great approach. I definitely believe that each person has a totally different way to learn. And the way that we learn languages is adaptive. Um, some people really like textbooks, but some people actually learn just watching TV, and that's simply amazing.
Exactly.
Um, yeah. So bilinguals often say that consistency over perfection. But how do you think we could stay consistent without burning out?
We need to have different ways of being consistent. If you focus only on one way to learn a language, of course, there's going to be burnout. You're going to feel frustrated after trying to read the same book again and again and not understanding it. And similar things are going to happen if you only focus on one skill, for example. So if you only focus on one website, perhaps, or one English level, if we're talking about English. I remember trying to learn Portuguese by just speaking, but at the moment of writing a message to a friend, I was frustrated. If I hadn't had the language keyword in the input in the keyboard in my cell phone changed into Portuguese, it would have been a problem for me. I had no idea how to write to him. So it's very important to be consistent, yes, and to acknowledge that at certain moments in your life, some things are going to be more difficult. It's very normal to see that people who learn languages at a late stage in life are not going to have a perfect pronunciation of the language. But as long as they can communicate their ideas and understand the ideas that come from other inputs, it is going to be enough. It's going to be good. So that's what I would say about being consistent and avoiding burning out when learning a language.
Thank you for sharing that. So now we're going to shift a little bit to, I mean, in the same topic, but I want you to learn a little bit about how learning languages has shaped who you are right now. So how has learning languages actually changed how you see your own culture?
Well, learning a language can be dangerous if you focus too much on the culture of the cultures of the language you're learning. And there was a moment in my life in which I was disdainful of everything related to my language. So I didn't care too much about my culture or my origins and things like that. But then, when you learn that you can deal with both things and there can be like a concoction of both cultures, or even the third one now that we're talking about Portuguese, you can make it work. Let's say. Um, I still focus much on certain, I would even say, traditions or personal customs when learning languages. So if I am learning Portuguese, I try to focus only on things related to Portuguese cultures, Brazil, Portugal. even even Cape Verde can be. So these things can be very useful, but there is a moment when you have to say it's enough. I need to understand my culture better. And the same thing with English. I have to be honest with you. I don't listen to music in Spanish. Whenever I listen to music in Spanish, it's a strange day. It's a day in which perhaps I'm fed up of correcting people all the time and helping people all the time, that I feel like, okay, I want to think in Spanish. So some weeks ago, a coworker, a Spanish teacher, saw me reading a book in Spanish, and he said, "We are reading a book in Spanish. What's that? You're never reading Spanish." And I told him, "Well, the thing is, sometimes you have to, you want to. Yes, you definitely need that." And we are talking about something very important here, and it's, if you want to learn a language, you need to focus also on the culture of that language. You cannot learn it if there's no approach to the culture of the language you're learning.
I completely agree with that statement. And I really think that if you, it's kind of like the term immersion is something that I learned early in the day when I was learning English. And as I was learning by myself, I was trying to, watch as much TV from America that I could. I would try to listen the music that people listen here because I wanted to, understand a little bit better the culture of this of the people here. So I absolutely agree with that statement. And well, thank you for sharing that again. Have you ever had any conversation where the language barrier led to a hilarious or profound moment?
Oh, where do you want me to start?
For the beginning.
Definitely, I had many times. Most, I have to be honest. Most of the times they come from people who are talking with me, but I remember in my first times, I suppose this is a podcast in which I can share some information that is embarrassing but doesn't create any shame, or I suppose most of the people who listen to your podcast are adults. So I got to tell you, I remember learning the language and working at the same time. And my boss was a British lady, and she was looking for her pen. And she was, asking the typical question, "Have you seen a pen that was around here?" And the pen was blue. And instead of saying, "Are you looking for a blue pen?" I said, "Are you looking for a blue penis?" And I remember repeating the question like 3 times. It was so embarrassing. When I noticed what I was saying, I felt so bad, and everybody was laughing at me. Yeah, and it's something that actually you made me reach a very deep corner in my mind right now, because that's something I gotta say to everybody. So that is one, and many other times, especially when you're starting as a teacher, you make mistakes. Sometimes you use Spanglish, and sometimes you don't know much about certain vocabulary words that you need to employ that are the equivalent to your Spanish language. I remember a coworker in the early days, uh, talking to the students about holidays. Having free days during a week, or maybe during a Friday or Monday. It's very common in Colombia to have a holiday on a Monday. And he said, "Do you know about any bridges?" Because it was a complete transliteration of the Spanish word into English. And I had to correct him about it. I said, "Hey, it's not a bridge, it's a holiday. That's a word that you need to employ." So, well, that's a couple of things. One mine and one from a friend.
That's hilarious, and that always happens when you're learning a new language. I recall a couple of times like that as well, saying things that you shouldn't, and everyone is like just looking at you. But sometimes, in my case, nobody was correcting me, and I went on and on and on. So, well, that's part of the process of learning a new language. So, let me ask you, and this is probably a more personal, I will say personal question, but how has your life changed because of learning all these new languages?
Well, Jeff, David, it's my life. You know, it's part of my life. Um, it's been fantastic, I'd say. You know that a bilingual or a multilingual brain has plenty of advantages over a monolingual one. And I have noticed that. I have come to witness that. Your critical thinking, your logical thinking, it's it's so helpful in the way you see your life, how open you can become to new experiences, or how tolerant you can become to people who are very different from you. It even helps you with your mathematical processes, with math problems, with from geometry to calculus. You can improve much in many other disciplines and many other fields of learning just by learning a language. It opens doors to you. It's the means to learning about new people and having friends all around the world. I have met people from Finland to Albania, and knowing that there are certain universal languages that you can employ is very it makes it very easy to communicate and to enrich your lives in a more personal in the professional way. Learning languages or knowing languages has helped me to aim to a possible retirement in around 12 to 14 years to buy my own house. So knowing languages is a win-win situation. It will always be rewarding, no matter the field in which you're working at.
I cannot be more agree with that. I truly believe that languages open the world for a lot of new opportunities. So it is amazing that what you just shared.
I'm glad that you agree with me.
Oh yeah, for sure,
I'm glad that
absolutely.
you
I'm
agree with
agree
me.
with you.
Actually, I was, you know, repeating your phrase with a correction. That's what I do. I'm sorry, I'm a teacher. I'm always correcting people. So
That's
I
fine.
hope you don't mind. Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm still learning English and I'm learning a couple things more. So my head right now is just a pod with a lot of different things. So thank you for correcting me as well.
No, no. My pleasure.
Uh, so, Guillermo, I want to wrap up our conversation today with two questions for you. The first one is if someone wants to start today to learning any language, what's your 30-minute challenge for them?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I would say find a speaking partner. I would say that find somebody to speak with. It doesn't matter if you make a lot of mistakes, find someone to speak with. Focus on listening, listen to something and try to share it with somebody else. And make sure that that person can help you with the language. But try to speak. That would be one of the challenges, perhaps one of the most basic and most important ones. And I would also tell that person if we're focusing only on 30 minutes, try to do something related to the language you're learning every day, at least those 30 minutes. That would be my challenge for them.
Excellent. And yeah, I think that's part of the consistency that we were talking before. You can keep going and you can go a little bit slow, but including that during your routine is going to change everything. And final question, what's a language myth you want to bury forever?
Sorry, could you please repeat the question?
Sure.
What's
So,
that?
what is a language myth that you want to bury forever?
Oh, I can't do it. I cannot learn a language. I'm too old to learn languages. Yes, it's the typical you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It's not true. Anyone can learn a language. So I would say that. Actually, I have two. Is it okay if I say the other one?
Oh, absolutely, please.
Okay, so the other one is you have to learn in an English speaking country or in a native country if you want to learn the language. It's not true. So you don't need absolutely native teachers. I have seen native teachers who are really awful at teaching. I'm sorry, but that's true. And I have met people who have been living in the native language its country or in the target language country for 15, 20, 30 years, and they have never learned the language, especially because when we go to live in that country, we miss our culture and we tend to get together with people with similar cultural background. So we end up speaking our native language and we don't learn the new one. So it's not a matter of where you live or living in the country or how old you are. As we said before, you need a mindset. And that is what's going to take you to success when learning a language.
This was so insightful, Guillermo. Thank you very much for sharing your journey, sharing your tips, your tricks, your tactics, your ideas. I really appreciate you being here talking to me. And well, I hope that you enjoy also the conversation today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, David. It was awesome, actually. It was a great and a pretty much new experience for me. So I enjoyed being with you. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you for listening this episode of the Fluency Project. I wish we helped you find your way to learn a new language and that you can use all these tools to help you in the process. Before you go, don't forget about 3 things. First, share this episode with those you know are learning a new language so they can start getting the tools to thrive. Second, leave us a review in the platform you like. That will help us to reach more language learners. And third, don't forget to secure your free language assessment using the link in the show notes. I'll see you in the next episode to keep growing and learning together. Until next time.